Hey friends, it's Robin. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing another round of recent reads. I do want to warn you, it has been quite a while since I have read some of these books. I am very behind on recent reads, and I've been really bad about reviewing books, so I don't entirely remember everything about all of these books, but I have 10 more books that I want to talk about that I read, I think back in February at this point, and it's the end of March. We'll catch up eventually, hopefully. Let's get right into the reviews. We're going to kick it off with my one DNF, and that was Daughter of No World by Carissa Broadbent. I picked this up, one, because it was a Patreon book club pick for Riley's Patreon, and I have seen this everywhere. Everybody raves about this book, everybody loves it, and I couldn't. It's not even that this book was like bad by any means. I only made it 16% in, but this is very fantasy, and I just didn't care. I just didn't care. This has a lot of like war stuff, and our heroine is trying to save her people and she's trying to get trained, and this trainer is doesn't want to help her because he was wronged by this group that is supposed to train her, and like I just didn't care. I didn't care at all about any of it. I think if you are a more avid fantasy reader, you would enjoy this a lot more. I just prefer my books to be more romance than a fantasy book with a romance. And like that might change later in the books, but all of the world building just kind of didn't work for me. It's really me as a reader, not anything about this book. I'm sure this book is, in fact, a fantastic fantasy romance. I don't like fantasy building, so I DNF'd that one. It just wasn't for me, that's fine. After that, I read Evil Twin by Katie Wilde. I read this for my fantasy reading vlog. I will have that linked in all of the places, but I did an entire vlog where I read, was it 4 fantasy books that were all part of my like reader's guide to fantasy romance series. This was one of them. I gave this 3.5 stars. This started off really, really strong for me. This is kind of like a villain romance. Our main characters are kind of the villains of their family, and it is their romance together. I don't want to say too much about the plot of this one because there are quite a few twists and turns at the beginning of the book, and so I don't want to ruin those reveals at all. I would say like the first 2/3 of this was so much stronger for me than the final third, and after like the final reveal happened, I felt like that last third of the book just didn't do much. That's kind of why I gave this a 3.5. I still really enjoyed it, but it just felt like it lost steam for me at the end, but had amazing reveals. And if you are looking for like a really good villain romance, I highly recommend this one. It was a good time. Then I picked up Something Wild and Wonderful by Anita Kelly. I have talked about this book in a whole bunch of videos, I feel like at this point, because it ended up like on a spring recommendations and all of these things, and I never reviewed it. I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely love everything that Anita Kelly does, and this book was so good. I gave their last book 5 stars, and I think this one I loved even more than the last one. This is an romance about these 2 main characters who are both hiking the Pacific Crest Trail for different reasons, and I thought the romance aspects as well as the hiking aspects as well as their own personal journeys and the messages and discussions that this brought up, I felt like all of it was just balanced so well, and I fell so hard for these main characters. The romance was beautiful, and so many people picked this up for the trans rights readathon, and it has me so happy because everyone needs to read this book. I think it is so fantastic. We're gonna get the Criminal Intentions books out of the way right away because I read 3 of them. Yeah, I read 3 of them for this recent reads, and I will be taking a break just for a little bit because I did end up finishing the first season. So I read Crescendo and then The Hatter's Game parts 1 and 2. And I gave obviously all of these 5 stars. Like I don't even feel like I need to share my ratings with you for this series anymore because y'all know it. But this was the finale to the first season of Criminal Intentions. If you don't know, this entire series is broken up into seasons, very similar to how like a crime drama would be set up. And so there's always like a 2-part finale and things like that. I loved the rest of the season. It was so good. I had to essentially binge all 3 of these back to back to back. There is no way that you can stop in between Hatter's Game Part 1 and 2. It was essentially a full-length book that Cole McCade broke up into 2. The ending and the wrap-up was amazing. I just love everything about this series. And this is another one. I keep trying to get everyone to read it. People, again, read this for the Trans Rights Readathon, and it had me so happy because the series is just my entire personality. And so if you haven't read it yet, please go check it out. After that, I read A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley, and I ended up giving this one a 3.5 as well. In my rating, the difference between like a 3.5 and 4 is the difference between saying I love a book versus I really like a book. So this isn't something that I would say I loved, but it's something that I really, really liked. And it is a book that I would recommend, especially for this one in particular. This is a paranormal sort of fantasy romance, but I feel like this would be really good for somebody that doesn't necessarily read a lot of fantasy or a lot of paranormal and they prefer rom-coms. I feel like this would be a perfect one to kind of like bridge that gap because this is more rom-com-y with some fantastical elements than more paranormal or fantasy with a romance, if that makes any sense. But in this one, essentially our heroine comes from this very prestigious witch family, and there was some sort of prophecy that her mother got when she was born, and she's supposed to be this ultra powerful witch, but she has no control over her magic, and the only thing she seems to be good at is nature magic, but because it isn't like flashy or anything, nobody really considers her a powerful witch. She is practicing her magic and she accidentally summons a soul bargaining demon, and so he and her are now trapped together. She doesn't want to give up her soul. He doesn't want to trick her into doing it because he has human feelings now. And so the two of them end up getting stuck living together, and it is a fake dating, enemies to lovers romance. There is a lot of nature conservation discussions had in here and about the destruction of our planet and nature and things like that. And so this does have some really fantastic themes in it, as well as a cute enemies to lovers romance. It just wasn't something that I ever completely fell in love with. I will say that I listened to the audiobook and I didn't love the voices that the narrators did for the other character, so that may have played into it a little bit. But beyond that, I thought this was really fun. I thought it was really cute. This has a really good friendship group. It has a terrible family. Her family, utter trash. So just know that one going in, but she has an amazing friend group. Their romance is really cute. Overall, it was a really good time. After that, I read The Four Leaf by Lee Jaco, and I gave this one 4 stars. This series, this is part of the Hollow Knight series, and I cannot get enough of this series. I think it is so fucking fun, and all of them kind of take place around a holiday, but they're all so vague in their holiday that I think you could easily read these ones outside of that holiday. Even though I am usually a reader who like will only read things like around that season, this one is so loosely St. Patrick's Day that I think this would be perfect for any time in spring. This entire series follows these characters who each have a unique kink, and they all kind of take place around a holiday. This one, obviously St. Patrick's Day. The St. Patrick's Day element actually happens behind the scenes. So our heroine and her sister own this hotel, and there is a St. Patrick's Day parade that is happening nearby, and because of that they have a lot of guests at the hotel. So that is the St. Patrick's Day element. Otherwise, this is a best friends to lovers romance. Her childhood best friend is a professional athlete. I want to say he's a rugby player, but I don't remember for sure. But he frequently returns to the hotel to help them out, and the two of them finally confront the fact that they have both been carrying feelings for each other for many, many years. And our hero is into primal play, and so they have a lot of outdoors, woodsy, steamy scenes. So I feel like it's perfect for spring because it takes place so much outdoors at the end, but it's so minimally St. Patrick's Day that I don't think it's one that you necessarily need to read like exclusively around that time of year. So 4 stars for this one. I love it. Lee Jaco is like, her kink and steamy scenes are so top tier. I just love them every single time. I know that I'm going to be reading Liberty Falls this summer, and then I think there's still like 3 more that she's planning to come out with this year, and I can't wait. And then I listened to Caressed by Ice by Nalini Singh. This is book 3? I'm totally forgetting how far in I am at this point. Yeah, it's book 3 in the Psy Changeling series. I've pitched this one quite a bit, but Nalini Singh is known for her urban fantasy. That's what this one is. There are shifters, there are Psys, and there are humans. And this one was a shifter Psy romance, but our Psy in this one is already part of one of the like shifter groups. Like, he's already left the Psys, and he is their equivalent of like a kill for hire, and he's escaped that, and he has absolutely no emotions because his powers are kind of enhanced by his emotions, and so the more that he feels, the more that his power lashes out, and so he has really, really shut down all of his emotions, and the shifters are all about emotions and feeling in touch and all of those things. He can't really touch her without things kind of going haywire. And so he's really cutting her off, even though he has this really strong pull towards her. I think this was my favorite of the series so far. He's definitely one of my favorite heroes because he's so tortured, and I just loved it. And our heroine really like warms him up, and it was really well done. The last book that I read was The Nanny by Lana Ferguson. This one comes out in April, but I did get it out of the way right away because I realized at this point that I had like 8 April arcs that I needed to get to, and so I redid my TBR a little bit and added some of those in, but I give this one 3.5 stars, and this is one of those books that it had the potential to be a 5-star. This had so many of my buzzwords in it. This had a single dad. It was a nanny romance. There's an age gap. Like, so many things in here that I loved. And this had peaks and valleys for me. There were times in here that I was completely in love with it. And then it would have these moments that I just couldn't quite get on board with. So in this one, our heroine used to have an OnlyFans, and she ended up having this client that kind of became like a super fan, and she thought that they had something going on. And she was ready to meet up with him, and suddenly he disappears. And she shuts down her site. Now she needs a new job, and she ends up getting hired as this guy's nanny. And slowly she comes to realize that he was the guy from her OnlyFans that she was supposed to meet up with, and she doesn't know why he ghosted her. And so she is kind of tentative about the whole position and decides to keep it from him because she doesn't want to lose her job. And it is their forced proximity romance. She is a live-in nanny. The daughter is really cute. Their romance was really cute. There were just little things in here that kept taking me out of the story. For example, the number of times that these two like accidentally meet in the apartment was started to almost get obnoxious because it was like the author didn't know how to initiate their conversations. And so it was like 6 or 7 times, I swear, I might be exaggerating, but it felt that way, that every sort of like discussion that they needed to have started off with one of them being in the kitchen and the other one coming up and scaring them, and then them being like, fancy meeting you here. And I was like, can we come up with a new way to have them get together and have a conversation? Because it kept happening in the same way. And there were like repeated lines about how it was like, I was so caught up in this, that must have been the reason that I didn't know he was there. That was the reason why I didn't know she was there. And I was just like, can we have some variety here? And so there were little things like that. And then I didn't particularly love the third act breakup, I guess. It felt a little forced, it felt a little intense. Our heroine is one of those people that was just like, I have to sacrifice everything for your heart. And it's like, you don't need to be so dramatic about this. It's not that big of a deal. And so there were just like little things in there that I didn't love, but this had the setup for a favorite book for me. And so I'm really, really curious to read more from this author in the future because I do believe that this was a debut. And so a lot of those little like nitpicky things I think could be fixed in her later books. I actually think she has a second book coming out at the end of the year, December-ish maybe. So I'm very excited for that. And I think that one's a fantasy. That's going to be it for this recent reads. Again, I kept this pretty quick because in all honesty, I read a lot of these books over a month ago at this point. But if you ever want to know my ratings or things like that in more real time, that is always linked down below for you. Let me know if you have read any of these. Let me know if you have added any of these to your TBR, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!